Alright guys, today on What to Do, we are going to cover hydraulic pumps. I have a Bobcat Predator Pro zero turn in the shop, and the right side hydraulics, there's nothing. It's just going in circles, okay? So, my job here is to save my company some money, so we're not dumping out an additional $700, $800 for these gears. The price they charge for some of these is ridiculous. Some of them go in the thousands of dollars. But the truth of the matter is, with a little bit of knowledge and follow this video, you might be able to save your pump. And 80% of the time, you can. And you don't even have to be a mechanic. You just need a couple basic household tools that you'll have laying around, and I'm going to show you what to look for and possibly get your machine up and running again without having to dish out all that money. Alright, so I'm going to try to save my boss $600 right now, and you can do this in as little as probably 30 minutes, maybe less. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so this particular model here, this is the Bobcat Predator Pro, and I already have the, this has two hydro gears here. Alright, they work independently with each other. This one is the one I just took out. Alright, I did not cover the tutorial of taking it out, but I can tell you the biggest headache I had was taking the pulley off the bottom of the machine down there, because the two bolts that hold the hydro gear go through here, and you got to get that pulley off, one, to pull the gear out of here, but two, the nuts that go to these bolts right here are hidden beneath that pulley. So the pulley's got to come off, and you're going to need a puller, a proper puller to pull that off. But that's not why you're here. Let's get into the hydro gear. This is a hydro gear that is going to go into that machine, okay? And I basically had a bunch of these laying around. So what I did was cleaned it all up, and I ripped apart each of the motors to find good pieces in each of them and reassemble it back together. So what you want to do and what you want to look for on your gear first is understanding, okay? So this here is your charge pump, all right? And underneath of this, there is a little gear that will rotate around, which basically charges your pump, and it helps build up that pressure, okay? So one of the things you can look for is by taking this off. I already have these loose. Be very, very careful when you pull this up. There is going to be a little spring and a ball in there. All right, so when you pull this off, this might be a little bit tight at first. What you do is get yourself just a little hammer or something metal and tap this to the side a couple of times. This will free up. Okay, don't smack it real hard, but tap it lightly until you see it come loose. Now, when you pull this up, go real gentle. There's your spring right there. Okay, and here is the bottom. You want to examine this here, and I apologize for the camera. My camera has just got grease caked on it, and I can't get it cleaned up. But just examine this here. Make sure there's no big digs. There's nothing in here, because when you use dirty hydraulic fluid and it gets in here, it's going to spin around and around and around, and it's just going to score this all up, which basically is going to prevent you from building that pressure, because your fluids are going to start blowing by in there, so to speak. And take your spring and put this in a really safe place. All right, see how this just spins around? You should be able to spin this pretty freely. And you can see by the way this spins, it goes up and it comes down. It goes up and it comes down. And what that's doing is it's charging that gear there. This is helping build your pressure there, okay? So if yours is seized up, and I have one here that I ripped apart, and I'm keeping these out for examples, all right? This particular gear, I have two gears here, one here and one here, and I'm going to show you the problems. I'm going to identify them. So if we go to the charge pump on this one, this gear, I am unable to spin this. I'm going to try to set my camera down to show you. Alright, so this, you can see, I can't spin this gear around in there. It goes like half a turn, and then it seizes up. Alright, now our new one, again, up here, I just showed you. Let me show you what it's supposed to do. I can get it off of here. Alright. See how that just goes right around? It can just spin that freely. Alright, so that's one of the problems you may have with your pump. when you get stuff inside your hydraulic oil, all it takes is one little piece of dirt to get in there and score all this up and prevent this from spinning. So check that first. If yours is not spinning, you're just going to take off that charge pump, which is these two bolts and your charge pump head here. Okay, so you would pull that off, and that will allow you access to this. And if just this is gone, you can possibly, if you don't have an extra pump around, and you to see if the one in there is good, you can just order this here. Okay, but chances are, if this is locked up because there was dirt in there, you might want to disassemble the rest of your pump and clean it out and make sure nothing else is seized up. And that's what we'll get into now. Okay, so we know that our charge pump here is good. So we're going to remove this. All right. And we will just, this just slides straight up. It's a spline right there. Okay, so you're just going to pull that straight up. All right, now moving on. You're going to need a 9/16 to take these four off. When you take these four off, this head here should pop up in the air because there's this little, it looks like an old magazine out of an old handgun, right? Where you put the bullets in. Well, these are spring activated. So these right now are compressed with that head. And when you undo those bolts, it's going to pop. And it's going to push this head up. Now, if it doesn't come springing up, chances are you're going to have one of these that is seized like this one, and we'll get back to that in a second. Let's take these bolts off. Now that you've examined this, we're going to go a little bit deeper. All right, I'm going to hold the camera up here because I don't have a tripod, but we're going to take these bolts out. And if you watch that head, it should pop up in the air. All right, after this one, this should pop up. Let me put the camera on here. Come on, get on there. All right, ready? See? See that? See how it popped up? That's telling me that the shoes in there are more than likely good. If you're taking your bolts off and it doesn't pop up in the air like that, then you know before you even remove this that there's something else that's bound up in there. All right, but let's pull these four bolts out. Try to lift this straight up if you can. You may have to wiggle a little bit. There we go. All right, first thing you want to do is, I know it's hard to see here, is just examine this. See, make sure that this isn't all scored up. You might see some little tiny swirls in it. That's normal. But just make sure there's no really big digs. You don't see any chunks of metal. But since you have this off, you probably want to get some air and blow it in there just in case there's any debris or whatever inside of there. All right, so let's set this down here. What you want to do is turn this thing now upside down and let this fall out into your hand. And I got to set the camera down to show you that. Now I have this in a vise, but it's not in the vise too tight. You don't want to crank this vise too tight because you don't want to crack your casing here. But I'm going to loosen this up just a hair. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand on top of this and I'm going to turn this upside down. So now that you have this out, you want to examine this. Okay, this is one of the things that goes bad also. You may find that one of these is stuck in a down position and it's seized up. Okay, you can get dirt and stuff inside of there and it can prevent that from springing back up, which in return is going to prevent your mower from building the pressure that it needs. All right, so basically what this does, there's a swash plate in there, and I'll show you in a second. But this sits on that swash plate, all right? And it goes around like that, and you can see it's compressing those springs in as it turns. That is building your pressure. Okay, so all of these need to be operating, and they need to be in the up position. If they're completely down, it's seized up, and this is basically just spinning inside of your hydro gear, and it's not building any pressure. All right, now I'm going to show you what one looks like that's seized up. On this particular pump here, when I took this one out, these, you can see, I can't even push them. They are jammed up in there. They're seized up. Now, Let me get some better light. There is a way that you can possibly unseize these and hope that it didn't score up the walls inside to where you can reuse it. Okay, but you can see these are all okay, but these two here are stuck. Now, if this is the problem with yours, what you can try to do to unseize these, and you have to be really careful because you don't want to do damage down here either. All right, this one is got some really heavy scoring on it, so this is not salvageable. But so one of these just fell out. So that's probably good that it did. I wanted to show you. So if you're taking this out and these fall out, don't panic. They will come apart just like that. This part here, your wider part, the base of the spring, that goes at the bottom. And this spring pretty much just slides back in there like that. And then what you can do is just put it back in the hole. All right. It's hard to do it with one hand, but there we go. Slide it back in there and make sure it's going up and down. All right, now back to getting these out. What you can do is you can flip this upside down, and you have all these ports here. All right, now you don't want to get something too wide that you jam in there that you score up these ports. These are already scored pretty bad. This is it from the damaged one. But what I do is I take, and you shouldn't need a lot of pressure. I take this little tiny screwdriver here, and it's going to go down right in there. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. Yeah, some of these springs are going to fall out, but that's okay. All right, so I'll flip this upside down, and I will tap. And there it goes. All right, that just unfreed that one. So let's pull that out of there. Now that port there, it's hard to see with this camera, and I apologize, but you want to look down inside of there and see, and I can see definitely some crud in there and some scoring. Now, you may be able to clean that out. Get yourself something thin, a screwdriver with a rag on it, some carbon choke cleaner, run that through there first and see if clean it up, and then examine the walls. If they're really heavily scored, then it's going to be a problem. But if it's not, maybe there was just some dirt that was stuck in there, and maybe you caught the problem early enough to where it didn't damage it, and you could just slide it back in there after you clean it, and it should go up and down like that. Okay, you can put a little bit of lubrication in there when you're putting these back in, and just make sure that it's going to go up and down, pump it a couple of times, and make sure it's not going to seize up again. And that's it. And you may be able to get them all operating again, and that might solve your problem. The last thing, well, actually, let me show you this one first. This particular one, look at this one. All of them are seized, completely jammed down in there, but this one. And that was doing absolutely nothing. It was just spinning in there, and these weren't not doing anything. They're just seized up in there. So that tells me there was a lot of crap inside of this motor. All right, but what that rides on, I'll show you here. Okay, let's go over to the newer one. All right, it faces down, okay? So when this, see if I can get some good light. See how that pivots back and forth like that? Well, that's what I was showing you with my hand earlier. That's going to pivot, and it's going to push those springs up and down, okay? And that's going to build your pressure. Without those springs going up and down, well, then you're messing up the whole cycle and the whole science of it, and you're going to either A, lose pressure, or you're not going to have any at all. All right. So after you have examined this piece, and whether yours was good or bad or whatever, you're moving forward now. Now here, if you get yourself a little pick, you got a bearing here. You just get a little pick, and you can just pull this up. Just like that. Just check this out. Make sure it's not scored. Clean it. If there was debris or any metal shavings or anything on it, you want to make sure you clean all that off before you put it back in. All right. This side has a little groove. That's where your bearings ride in. This little racetrack right here. All right. So that's how you know when you put it back in. You see the bearing? that groove, you're going to flip because it's going to ride on those bearings. Now this you can examine, and also make sure your swash plate is going back and forth, because if this ain't rocking, then that means it's not working with this, and that means you're not getting the pressure and the flow that you need. So this one seems to be rocking okay, and our bearing, they all seem to be good. Now you can further examine. It's going to be in, you can pull that out with a pick. That just slides right out. All right, we'll set that aside. You can clean that too. Now down here at the bottom, now this swash plate, if you take your pick, you'll be able to pull that straight up. The tricky part is, see this little, let me try to get in better light. All right, can you see this little notched out, it's almost like half of a square here? Well, that's riding on this right here. There's a little tiny square, it looks like a nut down there, that will slide onto this shaft. And if you pull this out, you will see it. And putting this back in can be a little bit tricky because you gotta kind of position this over top of that little square nut down there, and it will drop right down on. But I'm not gonna pull that up because I don't feel like fighting to put that back in there. But this seems to be operating okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spray some carbon choke cleaner in here or something, get some air. If there's anything in there, I will turn this sideways, and I will blow some air and stuff in there and try to get any debris that's out of there. All right, but if this is moving freely for you and your bearing seems to be okay, don't mess with that. You don't need to go any deeper than that. All right, so I'm gonna set these back in here for now. They just drop right in place just like that, see? And that should spin freely. And that's basically it. Those are some of the problems you want to look for. And hopefully this will help save you $600 or so on replacing these parts. All right, but that's really it. It's really simple to take these apart, pull out each piece one at a time, make sure they're operating correctly, and if one of them is so bad that you can't fix it, just order that piece. I know on Amazon they do sell rebuild kits for these. It's going to be a lot less cheaper than buying a whole new pump in general, because you don't need to buy the whole case. You don't need all that stuff. 90% of the time, it might just be one little thing inside that you need. But if you caught the problem early enough, you'll be able to unfree a lot of these mechanisms, clean them up, and put it back together, and your unit should be working fine. And start to finish, ripping these apart and cleaning them should take you a half hour at the most and put it back together. I think it's worth the time to do that before you just go buy a whole new pump. Hit subscribe below and give me a thumbs up. I do these videos daily, and I'm about 200 subscribers away from reaching my 1,000 subscribers. So if you can do that for me, just because I took the time out to possibly help you, hopefully I did, I would really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time.